All right. Hello and welcome everyone to what we are calling Relationships 101. So this is, as you can see on the screen, brought to you by the Counseling Center at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach. But if this applies elsewhere or benefits worldwide and Prescott students, even maybe someone outside of that, we would love that as well. But today we'll be talking about relationships, mostly romantically focused ones, in a way of approaching them in healthy context and some other things. But there will be some objectives in the onset going part of this presentation. Either way, I thought I would love to introduce myself to anyone who's listening to this, including students. So my name is Kevin Smith. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a doctorate holder, so maybe I'm Dr. Smith, but we don't need to get locked up on titles. I am also one of the staff counselors, mental health counselors, mental health therapists, whatever you want to call it, at the Counseling Center in Daytona Beach. And I have various experience with couples ranging from working on divorce and reconciliation, figuring out what people want to do, all the way up to repairing a marriage, repairing relationships, and even working on college-related relationships. So I think we should be in store for some good stuff, but let's get moving forward. So we have a few objectives that we would love for you to have insight or understanding about when finished watching this presentation. So the idea of healthy relationship qualities are going to be a big thing to have some understanding about, so you can use those later. Relational expectations, what they should be, what they could be, what you feel like you have already and what you can improve on. Those are important. And then just a little perspective of conflict and control in relationships, because even though they can be beautiful, wonderful, and healing, that does not mean that they're going to be perfect. So they will have struggles, stress, and a little bit of clashing every now and then, as long as they don't enter into problematic areas. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. But moving into the next thing, a big aspect to remember about this presentation is that these slides are designed to be informational and not a form of therapy. So if you sit down with your partner and watch this together, I don't imagine that you will solve all your problems or all of a sudden everything will come into to view or have perfect perspective. If you feel like you're really experiencing distressful relational issues or having personal things getting in the way of your relationship, for students at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Daytona Beach, please call the Counseling Center. Our number is on the screen, 386-226-6035, and reach out for either individual counseling / therapy, or we offer couples where both partners are present. If you're not, psychologytoday.com is a great resource to look into an accessible provider in your area. But that is not an endorsement, nor do we need to get sponsorship dollars from anyone. So don't take it or get it twisted. But also it's good to just clarify, we would love to cover everything under the sun for relationships, but that is just not how the game works. So because of that, I think it's good to consider that the Counseling Center is putting out other workshops and presentations to round out your learning and skill set within relationships, be it sexual health, stress health, all sorts of things within that, as well as joining with other offices across campus that students might want to use to benefit a whole wellness wheel. But also some of the information in this presentation is built upon highly established researchers. So we do feel you'll learn something. The Gottman Institute, Gary Chapman's Love Languages, the PrEP Relationship Education Program in Denver, Colorado, all of those have been founded on wonderful amounts of research. So I think it should be a fantastic thing to go through. And just know that also, if you aren't in a relationship and you want to learn from this, we can roll with that too. So let's get it kicking here, starting off with healthy relationship characteristics. Could be saying, well, I feel like I know what some things are, but maybe I don't, maybe I do. Let's start off with just the first one, the idea of loving ourselves or loving someone other than ourselves. And maybe it doesn't have to go to the level that I love them, like I have tremendous romantic love for the other person or for myself, but it can just be the idea of wholly appreciating someone, ourselves and others included. So the ideas that come with that are acceptance, number one, independence, number two, and supported development of personal interests. Now, getting more into what those things might mean. Self-love, other love, it's definitely not about perfection of these experiences, but it's the process of engaging with them, connecting with them repeatedly. And the acceptance, the positives and negatives it's a balancing act that we can have wonderful things we'd love to highlight, we can have negative things we want to hide, but overall, we want to have a good balancing that we know we cannot get rid of either one. So we want to have some acceptance of the things we can't get rid of and acceptance that we're going to grow in things that we do want. So that's important, number one. But number two, that with independence without sacrificing connection, what is that supposed to mean? Well, it's just about a balance of retaining your personhood and dignity without belittling or diminishing the importance of your partner. You don't have to say they mean nothing to me, but also you still have to mean something and still have to have value because you have needs just like they do. And both can coexist in one shape or form, depending upon how you set up your relationship. In terms of supported development of personal interests, a close and intimate relationship is about the ability to be safe, secure, and invested in a connection of that relationship. So that starts highlighting the next thing that starts coming up, which is the ability to have that knowledge you won't be attacked, meaning an absence of fear, being vulnerable, interacting with the other partner, the idea of trusting yourself as well as that other person to do the best they can for your life and for their life. And then getting to feel secure without the interference of one addiction or another. Now, it doesn't have to mean, oh my gosh, they can't put down online shopping. Oh my gosh, they seem to like marijuana too much. Oh my gosh, they have an ongoing serious substance abuse habit. That doesn't mean they aren't lovable or aren't able to be supported, but there's also the idea that engaging in a relationship means I have to be able to feel connected and secure that they're going to be there and be accessible. And that creates a healthy, positive connection between one another without the interference of, are they going to disappear? Are they going to be taken away by this other thing, which in a lot of circles, addiction becomes almost a third person in a relationship. And also with addiction, not that it has to mean this, but there's a strong component of codependency that either a person relies on it or that the relationship relies on it in some weird circumstance to either soothe things or divert us away from stress and conflict. So it is very good to know that there are clinical routes, there are supportive options, therapies for if an addiction is in the process, and it is also very encouraged across couples counseling and relational therapy arenas to address addictive needs to help return to that secure feeling within a relationship. So finally, one last sense is the ability to be independent and separate. Now you could say like, oh, isn't this supposed to be a relationship? We do need each other. We need to be connected. Yes, absolutely. But there's also the idea that in a healthy relationship, you can have the knowledge that if I absolutely had to, even though I would not choose it, I would not want it, I could live without the other person. If I don't want to, great. That means I care about them, I want them. But if it feels like their existence qualifies the fact that I'm able to continue on or live my life, that may signal, a huge blending of feelings, maybe material needs, like I'm depending upon them to pay my rent or make sure I get food. And those can be some very tricky areas to navigate because, if we aren't able to handle our lives in some sense, then that other person serves as the whole essence of us living a life, being the building block to getting to the next steps in life. And it breeds a sense of codependency. We can have love for having our partner in our lives. We can even desire that they continue to be there for every coming experience. But if cognitive or emotional well-being crumbles when their involvement is hindered, like what if they're away on business, what if they're spending time with a sick family member that was all of a sudden, they just don't have a timetable for return, we won't be able to live without them, without their income, without their emotional presence. So there is this idea that I'm still an independent being and I can move forward, but we also have this ability to agree on things, to disagree on things, and both can be valid and useful. So across loving ourselves and them, the chance to be close and intimate without fear of repercussion or issues or addiction, and the idea that we're still also individuals sets up very tight and positive relational experiences, something that can be very healthy in a global sense. If you need more ideas on how to do that, I encourage you to speak with a professional in your area or come connect with a counselor here at the counseling center. So another part that goes into it, because it's not just a one pony show or one trick arena, we are going to have the idea that, communication, what a shocker that comes up. So one thing to start out with communication is there are so many different varieties, there's so many different types, styles, methods that we would never cover them all. We more talk about characteristics and a focus of the communication when we're getting into it. So start highlighting some. There's a negative side to communication. Those can mean when we're trying to express ourselves with our partner, connect with our romantic interests, the use of labels, the aspect of verbal abuse, criticism, being defensive, having contempt for us or them, being stonewalled or stonewalling, not giving out anything. Now, these will be discussed later, so no worrying. But the labels, verbal abuse, and even extending into the aspect of violence, physical safety issues, sexual violence, it can all get very serious. Not that this whole topic has to be about that, but conflicts does come up, and they'll certainly come up later in this presentation, but communication can be where conflict starts out. And so if communication is gravitating around this negative experience of labels, being verbally abused, or being criticized without reason or necessariness, having violence being involved in the communication process to make it fully complete itself, that's not going to be blending into a healthy relational context or a good setup. But there is a positive side. So getting into that, if communication focuses on the ability to listen, involving empathy, while restraining some judgment, you will have a moment that you can probably start judging things like, oh, I don't know if cutting that person off in traffic was a good idea. That's a judgment. It's a very, very, very light one, but it's still a judgment. So when listening, having empathy while restraining judgment becomes a very positive, healthy relationship context. And also the ability to express yourself without fear. The ability to say things like, I feel that things didn't go as well as I wanted, or I feel like you're not really hearing me out. I need you to be there for me. I need you to hold me for a second or support me for a little bit. I'm having a really tough day. I want to have a better day. Can you help me with that? So it's not just saying those things, but it's the aspect of being able to express those needs in that context, similar to the last slide, talking about I should be able to be close and intimate with you without the issue of I'm afraid of what will happen. So all in all this communication stuff can be summed into the idea that listening is highly important to the process of looking to understand rather than respond. And in communication, we can often really want our turn, like, okay, you had your turn, is it my turn? But we spent their whole turn thinking of what we would say. So generally, if you're going to focus on these positives and avoid these negatives, a caring partner will attentively listen to hear out what the other person said rather than listening so that they can know how they want to respond. Because communication is a lot like NASCAR. Well, I'll correct myself. Communication should be less like NASCAR, a speed race to the finish line, and more like smooth driving in the countryside where we know what's coming ahead. We're comfortable knowing the spot where we are, looking around. The road is very clear. We're not wobbling or weaving all over the road. It's a functional process. So that's always something to keep in mind with communication, but you're probably not shocked by hearing communication is in there. Okay, so moving forward, healthy relationship characteristics also have this idea that there's communality between the individuals, but there's also this essence or balance of power, which can be very important too, because if power is extremely in one partner's hands, that means the other person is at a severe disadvantage. It can be very risky or very problematic. So moving through this communality stuff. Agreement on basic values may be religiously based, may be morally based, may just be perspectives on life, but the very essential things are not severely opposed, or as being fancy, saying diametrically opposed. They do not want to be complete opposites. So basic values are important. A similar life or personal goal, if someone wants to really plant some roots in a geographic region, but the other person really wants to travel and explore the world, which means it might be hard to plant yourself down, that can become a conflict and maybe go against some of the basic values that were established before. And then also this communality means I don't need to battle or always work to change my partner. They may have dirty habits, unuseful habits, annoying habits, but we will grow with someone, they will grow with us, if it's over a long period of time, even through various relationships, we will grow. But when it's all about the sense of me being with them means I need to push them, fight them, argue with them so that they will become a certain person for me, that starts to get really risky and have some difficult territory, and you almost have to guard against that. But to be clear of one thing, communality is not about being the same person, needing all major interests in life to line up in a relationship. It's mostly about ensuring each partner's life goals can coexist. Progress simultaneously can be given compromise, opportunity, possibility between one partner to the other. That's a generally big thing. Now, on the side of balance of power, you don't want to see struggles, trying to take control of things or have the last word. And these absence of struggles hopefully last a long time. Like there should be gaps between any bumps in the road where authority or decision-making is trying to be held on to by one person over the other. So if it's battle for power, week after week, day after day, those would not be long periods of time. That can be an issue within a healthy relationship or deteriorate a healthy one. Each person is able to make decisions, and that's not a dangerous or scary thing, but based on the last slide, those things would be potentially communicated. So, okay, you made a decision, this is what it means for me. I can be good with that, I cannot. And I can communicate it as well. And then also like a balance of giving power to the other person, and Gottman likes to call this allowing influence or cultivating influence sometimes. And so that giving of power means I cede to you. I give you the option of deciding where we have dinner. I give you the option of deciding what our weekend looks like or what our big plan is right now. But you should also feel the experience of receiving a bit of power. Each person should share in the process, which is important. Now, if you have thoughts that once you get your partner to be a certain way or stop doing particular things, whether it's about changing them in that communality sense or this power sense that I have to be over them, that the desires to have power, change someone, can build division in a relationship as opposed to the fact that everyone changes as we get older. And those annoying habits can potentially either slip away or they start to become an intimate understanding of that person and not about coercing them to be a certain way or manipulating them to be how we believe. So these kind of blend together. That's why communality and balance of powers listed on the same thing. Okay, well, other than this lovely word jumbling of communication revisited, so something we want to look at is that communication in general, researchers have found that being able to talk about your problems, whether ordinary stressors and strains, being able to do it with your partner can help protect the relationship. It's very advantageous to be able to feel like you can communicate good stuff, bad stuff in between. Differences of opinion, conflict are part of every relationship, friendship, family, and romantic. The important thing is the aspect of handling the conflict and understanding that we will get to some point of resolving this disagreement, almost a belief system. And then maybe not using everything from this presentation or using things that weren't mentioned, forming a process of effective communication that you feel like gets the job done, both of you are happy with it, is essential for that healthy relationship that you want to build. So keeping that perspective in mind of, do I feel like our communication is effective? Great. Then I feel like we can be on the road to a healthy relationship. And I think otherwise, a healthy desire to talk to your partner about issues drives good energy into a relationship. So especially understanding that your needs and heart are embedded behind the stress, trying to reach out and connect with your partner, even if it's a partner that's been with you for a month, or it's one that's been with you for years, even your marital partner, your engaged partner, whoever, however you want to define the relationship, that those needs and that emotional sense is behind there, and everyone has it, that understanding that can sometimes be either way to extend ourselves to others or connect with them in our communication process. Okay, so communication, healthy relationship characteristics, all that comes down to, we have to have a dialogue. We have to engage, we have to meet, we have to share moments, talk, all that stuff. There's generally a few tools that are within the counseling therapeutic community that are enjoyed for creating this aspect of communication, or a process where both the talking partner and the other one listening, that will wait for their turn in a minute, get to achieve success and connection. So number one, mirroring. Mirroring is about confronting social response. Mirroring is about the comforting social response. It sounds a little better. That is felt when a talking partner observes and hears their message being shared. This tool helps you set up the idea that the message matters, that it was successful in making it to the other party, that, oh my gosh, did you hear me? Oh, thank goodness you understood all I was trying to say, because the person who's listening may say, let me see if I got that right. You said da 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 da. Or did I get it? Is there any more? They're trying to reflect the emotional, verbal, contextual content that was all going on within that. Now, another one, good old validation. Doesn't mean you have to praise or say, good job, you made sense, you're perfect. You don't have to go overboard. But validation is about letting your partner know that they may matter regardless of the message, that they're the reason for things to be important and why you listen to them. Otherwise, wouldn't they just be a stranger out on the street that, like, they listen, cool, if they don't, whatever. All of us generally tend to like a little bit of confirmation, and getting to share that they were able to confirm your message is a very positive experience within healthy relationships. Then the last area is empathy. I mean, not everything has to be empathetic, not everything has to be soft and touchy-feeling, but in a healthy relationship context, empathy is about utilizing pro-social efforts to become closer with the person we're talking to. It says, I can put you first because you matter. It creates a place where people want to be heard, where you want to return to, and somewhere that says, hey, I'm going to feel for you, I'm going to understand you, I'm going to give you a chance, so go for it. Empathy builds that place to kind of come back to. And it also may be a stretch sometimes if you feel like you aren't getting it back. So again, it returns to some communication, voicing up for our needs, being able to feel independent. You can kind of see how all this stuff builds upon one another. Okay, so aside from healthy relationship qualities or characteristics, relationships also have expectations. We all have wants and needs. And as discussed during the communication slides, it can be complicated getting those wants and needs to our romantic partner, even to our friends. You know, it's a little dicey. But increased expectations can easily become depth and trust within a relationship, considering how often they're attached to bigger life things, experiences, and whatnot. You know, it's relationship expectations are just part of the territory. But have you ever asked yourself this question? Do you ever become annoyed or angry with someone who acted differently than you expected? And then you find yourself saying, if you really love me, you would have blah, blah, blah. Why didn't you be there and support me? You should have done this instead of that. That would have been better for me. You're the last person I ever expected to do that. This is not at all like you. You really let me down. All those communicate this idea of having an expectation within a relationship, whether friendship and especially romantic. So a good stepping stone in understanding relational expectations is knowing where to look for them and what they mean for your relationship, because you will have some of them. So it's good to have a little honesty about it. So this would be a lovely area to be able to go far, far more in depth. However, we don't always have time for everything. So these are very summative, but if you feel like you click with some of them, consider how to investigate further. Consider looking a little bit more. So as you can see from the slide, where do they come from? Our family values, traditions that our family had, experiences around our family growing up can instill a lot of things, and that gets to mean all types of family. Could have been parents we were born to, parents we were adopted or fostered with, grandparents that we lived with in a unique circumstance, any variety of experience of people that we spent the majority of time with or felt like the average time during our growing years as a child, as a teenager, getting into the starting phase of adulthood. Other relationships, past experiences, expecting that another person will provide our personal happiness and fulfillment, even projecting onto someone else, meaning we're trying to get someone else to be a certain way of how we want them to be. I'm imagining you to be like this, listen to me like this, give this to me. That we're behaving that way, we're demanding that from them, we're pushing them for that. We're basically sending our energy onto them or towards them to get those things to happen. So here's a few things to consider. Every listed origin for relationship expectations can seem simple, but the depth of each one is key in understanding its possible impact on your life and your relationship. For instance, family traditions might be as simple as where we do holidays, or the family has a strong connection to a certain religion or spiritual practice. Family may even be just about who you go the extra mile for or not. So considering expectations that have arisen within each bullet point, when thinking about some of the examples, focus on what rules or requirements or even experiences that relate in your current relationship, like needing a friend to confirm plans the day of, after a previous friend neglected us in a critical moment when we were hoping they would. That can be a very telling experience. I have an expectation that's coming from that. And so since looking over some of these bullet points, how aware are you of them and how comfortable is it that you have expectations from these various areas? Because it's okay if we have one from every single area, more from another, or feeling like we're totally missing expectations from a certain thing. Like, I don't have any past relationships. How do I know what to expect? Does it mean this one has to end so I have more for the next one? No, it certainly does not. But just as a key point, since we can't cover everything, the fourth bullet, expecting happiness to be provided to you by the other person for personal fulfillment. It's going to come up in the next slide. So I want you to just be a little ready for that, because there's a key thing to know. But as always, relational expectations can be very important, so do not fret. They will come up, but they also won't mean things are going to fall apart. Okay, so let's move into how are we supposed to organize these expectations? How are we supposed to act on them? What the heck are we supposed to do with them if there's such important concepts? What you see on the screen are two different pictures. On the left, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and on the right, Gary Chapman's 5 love languages on how to connect with your partner. So each have a vision. Just stay with me for a second. I'm going to walk you through a little something. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the one on the left. Each level of the pyramid is an experience of being satisfied, fulfilled, or meeting the needs of an individual through life. You can see physiological and safety needs are basic. Those should be definitely guaranteed or set up in order to move forward in life. Psychological needs relate to belonging within a group or to another person, having our love met from a friendship perspective, an intimate relationship, romantic, as well as having esteem needs, being able to feel like we can accomplish something, or we've done things, or that we are contributing to the world. And then self-fulfillment relates to a self-actualization, being able to imagine, grab onto, and pursue full potential, the full experience of being a human being. So each level of that pyramid should be established before the next one is overly focused on or concentrated on. However, it's very common for most reasonable adults to say that their relationship provides security, or they feel safe around their partner, looking at the safety needs. But even though they're expressing that experience neglects the idea that we should be allowed and feel those bottom 2 levels. We should be able to fulfill them and experience them and know that they're there, even if the person had to disappear for a minute, or if we were not able to continue to be with them. If all of a sudden our food, water, and shelter for physiological needs goes away when they disappear, that's a dilemma. That may put a lot of strain on a relationship. So if our expectation is that our partner will establish our consistent access to those physiological needs and establish that safety, that security from the world, without it being a mutual decision, maybe something like a legalistic one, common law marriage, entering into a legal marriage, a joint legal commitment together, a mutual decision, then we have a trap in the making that the expectation of our relationship should not only provide happiness, but basic living needs. And that can provide a lot of exploitation, put a lot of imbalance in the power dynamic of a relationship, and make it very tricky. So this is just a quick perspective to consider. Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the earlier slide in relationship characteristics about independence in a relationship is to think about the first 2 levels of need and ask yourself, if your partner couldn't provide those to you, how well could you provide them to yourself? It's not to say that you have to, or that's a mandatory feature of relationships, but less emphasis on those bottom 2 levels from your partner can mean better relationship alignment in the roles that you assume and the connection that you have, especially leading to the expectations you have within the relationship over time. So it's not an end-all answer, but just start considering that question, because especially within college, student romantic relationships, those 2 areas can be very dicey. We're still working on life. We're still getting there. But I'm going to move along. And if there's ever questions, this is just the first plug that there are Q&As scheduled throughout the spring semester of 2022. And there will be other times for people to ask the Counseling Center about this. So when we look to the right, Chapman's love languages, they provide a deeper emotional need embedded within these relational expectations. Like, how do we want to be loved? How do we want to be cared for? I think there's a continual contradiction that with these love languages is that we express the love we want most, that we want to receive from them, but instead that's not the one we receive. Because if we're giving out our favorites and they're giving out their favorites, there may be a mismatch. Because if we don't have the identical ones, then we're going to be missing the mark and not feeling fully loved or fully appreciated. And that will create an expectation of, why don't you love me the way I need? Why aren't you doing that for me? And Chapman talks a lot about this in his book, so I highly encourage checking that out. But those missed expectations and increased frustrations in a relationship can be very difficult and almost seem like we're just always engaged in this conflict or this battle. And again, you can start to see, oh no, those healthy relationship characteristics might be in danger. But here's another way to focus on it. Expectations can be how we hope the world interacts with us, but they can also be how we want to interact with the world. And this is a great place for romantic partners and the intimacy that they bring to our lives to understand that there is a difference between not only the basic hierarchy of needs on the left, the physiological and safety ones of being for me, not because of my relationship, so I can move forward and have that intimate, loving connection, that belongingness with someone. But also I can have this relationship without threat of harm, threat of violence, threat of belittling or abuse, that I can have a very secure connection that also extends in offering love. Because you will probably know how you like to express love the most. There's also a quiz online that Chapman offers on his website, which is great. So it's very easy to feel the one you want the most. But it's also another thing to understand, maybe my partner has another one, and I'm missing those expectations too. So have I checked on those? Have I heard of them? Am I trying them out because they're going to feel a little foreign to me? It's almost like I'm giving out my secondhand love rather than my firsthand. But not to despair, not to be worried about it. Expectations give us drive. They give us motivation. And I think they're wonderful pieces within a relationship. So don't shy away from them, but embrace what you can and say, I'll need to work on some of these things later that you can't get to all the time. So here's a couple takeaways from relationship expectations. The most common cause of relationship conflict comes from unrealistic and unexpressed expectations. So you may have a few you haven't said, and you also may have a few that are totally unobtainable. Like, why can't you fly me to the top of the Empire State Building and take me on a romantic outing? Well, it turns out your partner's not Superman or Superwoman or a super person. So even though that's highly unrealistic, sometimes it can feel like we're expecting that level, that depth of things going on. But also another thing to think about with expectations is it's relatively to assume other people think and feel in a similar way to we do. Maybe it's an experience from childhood, or maybe it's another reason. But also as adults, we're able to rise above just saying, oh yes, everyone does, clearly. Otherwise we just all have one culture across the world and everything would be fine. However, as the adults, it's our job to communicate these thoughts as your partner can't read your mind, they can't read your thoughts. So communicating those needs becomes very vital. I think otherwise, the only thing I would mention is expectations in a relationship can become like a fantasy if they're never expressed or they're never shared. And it creates the unfortunate problem that no one will ever live up to this fantasy. Will never become a true, realistic fantasy that's lived out. But you do have a real partner, or you may be getting a real partner soon. So give them a chance. Give them an opportunity to own those expectations, to share in them, to see if they fit. And if they don't, the relationship may not work out. But relationships can wander into conflicts. Now, I'll admit I'm not always the most conflictual person. I don't love just going to battle every time. But I guess sometimes you seek out professional knowledge, hence I have a license and way too much education in this. However, you may not. So what the heck are we going to do about all this conflict? Or what if I feel like there is some in my relationship? What we can say is conflict in relationships can fit into a very healthy and desired process. It doesn't mean we're going to crumble. But that also means conflict can be good in relationships and a sign that both partners are speaking up for what they want, what they feel, what they need. However, at other times, conflict can be very unhelpful to the relationship, leading to feeling like we're distant, having actual physical distance because we need to be away from each other, pain, and even extreme levels leading into abusive scenarios, verbal, physical, or otherwise. Conflict can certainly be uncomfortable, but deciphering the experience of the conflict you're getting or what's happening, and if you feel it's good for you and your relationship, that's an important consideration. But it's also good to keep in mind that conflicts is best solved in direct connection with the person, as long as there's safety and non-violence occurring in that scenario. If there is violence, then we encourage you to seek out supportive shelters or resources that are in your area, community, university context, whatever. There are things that exist out there for you to escape any situation or just get ideas on how to move away from what's going on. So as long as no violence, expectations can lead us to engaging in conflict, and that conflict can help us achieve healthier outcomes. It can say we're wanting to mesh with this person. Okay, so something good to know is there's a very popular concept of the four horsemen, presented by John Gottman and his wife, Julie Gottman. So the four horsemen are really these four attitudes, kind of communication patterns, styles that potentially predict dissolution or ending of a relationship if they continue, get going, get ramped up. It's pretty normal, pretty understandable that partners can fall into these behaviors. We can too. But when engaging in connection, seeking to improve a relationship, they're best there to help increase awareness and highlight to us that things are going on, conflict is starting to rise, and that we need to do something. So let's name a few off, starting with some beginners. Criticism, you always do this. You never do that. You're not doing enough for me. You haven't helped me feel better in however long. Now, to point this out, contempt is a very strong one. So I'm going to highlight an ordering of things. But to explain it, contempt is the idea of insulting, name calling, sarcastic, mocking, demeaning aspects of a relationship. That type of commentary. Rolling your eyes at the other person just because you can't stand them, sneering at them because they make you so angry and you dislike them so much. You could say, why would someone be in a relationship at that point? But everyone has a different threshold and things can be very odd in that experience. There can be defensiveness. Oh, well, I didn't mean to do that. I was just busy with this other thing, having excuses. Well, I disagree. And then cross complaining that, well, I may have done this, but you did this to me earlier today, so I don't feel like I'm so much to blame. Or the good old, yes, I did disappoint you, but I think I've been doing a very good job. I'm still a really good person. All of it's to say, I don't want to hear the conflict you're presenting to me. I don't want to hear your issue that's going on. I'm defensive because I'm protecting myself. And stonewalling is one is a real mix in between territory, because it's known by stony silence, just walking away from the other person without handling anything, always changing the subject. These different horsemen can grow and build, starting with criticism, usually leading into defensiveness, and then engaging in stonewalling, and then ending with contempt. If we work through all of those, our relationship may not be in a very good state, and it may be at the point of dissolution or ending. So not to say, oh no, we have contempt, we're doomed, but also knowing that if you've gotten to that point, you've certainly gone through a lot. So conflict has been there for a minute. Some things to kind of consider is there are remedies to each one. With criticism, if you feel that's going on, rather than engaging issues abruptly and harshly, using a gentle startup. Talk about what you or they need or feel, and talking about what's going on with that, described in a neutral, objective, almost factual fashion without blame. And that may be hard. You may have to really work towards that, but that can be important. With defensiveness, claiming responsibility, saying I with no statements, asking yourself, what can I learn from this? What can I do about it? Practice going about things or getting undefensive, listening more than responding. That all pushes against the idea of, oh no, I don't have any problem. Experiencing contempt is describing feelings and needs, but not describing your partner. I need this, or I have felt unheard by you for a little while and I feel hurt. Not that you're such a jerk because you hurt me all the time. Not trying to name call, you're such an idiot because you did those things to me. It is definitely about trying to focus more on, I have some feelings and I'm engaging in the communication process of letting you know I am very upset with you. And then with stonewalling, the main remedy is to talk, to communicate, and not run away from the issue. But you may have to have other resources and stuff to help that move forward. Okay, so we're nearing towards the end of our presentation. So I hope you've certainly enjoyed it, but we have a few final important things to know because sometimes conflict can seem like, oh my gosh, it's here. What the heck are we going to do? Great. Kevin told us about these 4 different types called 4 Horsemen, but there's also this other stuff. So, common positive thing about conflict or the discomfort that it embeds in the relationship is that in a lot of occasions it will pass. In a couple occasions that isn't true, but in the cases where it does, in the couples that have conflict that eventually fades away or feels like it was heard or was met and then it moves along, you've just encountered a short-term type of conflict, one called solvable problems. So in terms of solvable, they're usually very situational, related to an instance, and focus on a specific topic. During these type of moments that are solvable, conflicts that are about an issue at hand, the context, the communication miscues, misunderstandings that were had during your starting awareness that there was a problem, just say that we have somewhere to go. Solvable problems are just as the name says, that we can manage them, we can resolve them, we can feel better about the relationship after the fact. They will come, they will go, sometimes without our involvement and sometimes with, but they are solvable, meaning we can get through them. And they're very healthy types for a relationship. As mentioned before, this is where the healthy aspect of conflict comes in, because I feel like if you solve a couple, it's a very nice thing. It's very enjoyable. Like, wow, we got over that hump. That's super cool. Another common thought about conflict in relationships are that the annoying and unappealing things your partner might do over and over habitually, or often enough that you notice them, those are tough. Those feel more long term. Those are called perpetual problems. They're very habitual. They're usually very focused on the characteristics of a person or a partner. So it's almost like, oh my gosh, it's part of them. But don't get too discouraged by the name. But they will just continue forever and ever, that even as we change or grow, they're always going to be there and they're always going to be stuck behind. Like somehow growing over time isn't going to build new habits, and doesn't mean that those old habits won't leave them. But we can understand that despite having a perpetual nature, we do grow, and that understanding those problems and conflicts related to those habitual ones can be accepted, can be understood about our partner, just like they should understand some things about us. I mean, I can get very particular about certain aspects of life, maybe a little organizing or maybe a little punctuality. And I can get tricky, difficult, having a bit of struggle about it, but it doesn't mean I'm not able to be connected with, or I don't want to connect with my partner. So the perpetual nature of it does not mean that it's unsolvable, that it's unchangeable. We will grow, but there's also an important thing to know with perpetual problems. They're generally suggested to be 50% or more of ongoing conflict in a relationship. That kind of general bickering you get with longer and longer relationships. That means that a relationship can be largely about learning to understand and accept your partner as they are. Not trying to change or battle them previously from another slide. And since those problems might be perpetual, a long-term romantic relationship, or one that you might stretch for years or even decades, will have things to stabilize around and new challenges to handle when solvable problems appear. And those are the ones that you can target, the short term, the immediate. And those long-term ones that have really put a barrier in place, that really have shifted the relationship, if communication doesn't solve those, seeking support and seeking help for engaging in that communication and repairing process, that is when it becomes important. We can also wait too long, but it's good to know that whether solvable or perpetual, we have some options and we have some understandings. Okay, so we're to the final major aspects, and it is very important to cover this because this goes for someone who may be listening, hoping to have some understanding. They may be feeling these pressures, and it's very important to understand. So I certainly hope this message reaches someone that is in need, and I certainly hope you feel like this can be beneficial to you or someone that you know, but do not feel like you have to save someone with these tools. Potentially, if you know someone, share it with them, give them a chance to watch. So getting started, both these pictures are well-established understandings of when conflict becomes unhealthy, painful, and abusive. Both of these experiences should be cautious reminders that romantic relationships are not an excuse to control, hurt, or dominate another human being. A relationship is a shared venture or opportunity of adulthood about the powerful and intimate connection we can have with that person and the commitment we provide to them. Neither of those processes are conducive to what that connection and commitment can be between a healthy couple or a healthy relationship structure. So when we shift our attention to the wheel on the left, there are many factors that feed into the central aspect of power and control, where the aspect of power and or controlling, the controlling nature is handled by one partner over the other. Generally, descriptions with this type of wheel will be focused on the idea of a female or cis female victim and a male or cis male oppressor, meaning the male partner in a heterosexual relationship is holding all the power and the female partner in the heterosexual relationship is not, and totally under their control to do what they want, to do what they wish, be exactly who that person wants them to be. It can be in the reverse process. There are instances of a heterosexual relationship having the female partner be the controller or oppressor and the male be a victim. Those are much less common, but still present. And even in same-sex relationships, intersex relationships, and any variety of a defined gender identity pairing relationship, like across any of those, we can still have these experiences of power and control. So do not feel like you're excluded just because of some type of description on gender. The main idea is that the building of power and control in a relationship can be executed through these forms of violence on the outer circle: physical, sexual, verbal in nature, cognitive, emotional. It uses a very procedural process at times, but it can also be a very discombobulating process, like using coercion and threats to throw someone off, using economic abuse of preventing them from getting a job or having money to create a life. Those two basic needs of safety and physiological needs, preventing that so they can't seek outside support, intimidating them from seeking support. If there's children involved, using those children as pawns to prevent that person from seeking a reclaiming of power, an opportunity to put control into their own hands, isolating them from other individuals. And in the usual case where the male is the oppressor, using a sense of male privilege that as a man, you are to be my servant. I make all the big decisions. I'm the master of the castle. I define how things are. I'm a man, this is my role. You're a woman, this is your role. So no matter the gender characteristics or how you identify, there can be a big experience that all these tools are used to cultivate a sense of power and control, and ultimately violence and oppression result from that relationship. And there are many people, thousands, tens of thousands, that are trapped in this type of dynamic and need some support, whether through a shelter, counseling, or legal advice and guidance. It can be a very tricky experience. Now, please understand that anyone could find circumstances in life that might lead them into a relationship like this. No one is immune. Anyone within this type of power and control can feel very powerless to change the relationship or leave it. So putting blame upon them for not just instantly leaving is often very misguided and unhelpful to their dynamic because we don't understand what placed them close to this moment. Another thing to consider is a positive opinion when you know someone's stuck in this wheel is to have a safe and effective resource to offer them that you can share with them repeatedly, whether a safe house, a guidance system, a resource center, just something that you feel like they can take control and engage with. The sharing could be singular, could be repeated, or just a form of encouragement. Either way, you still have to be understanding of the process that it might take someone to choose to escape and seek safety over that relationship based on all these tricky dynamics of isolation, economic abuse, intimidation, a lot of things. Now, on the right, what we're looking at is called the cycle of abuse. It's a very well-founded and researched idea of what happens within abusive relationships. It's a smaller process of how the wheel on the left looks, but it can build and escalate into an unhealthy relationship with very dangerous conflictual moments. These patterns may be hard to piece together, so it's okay if it takes you time, takes someone time, or takes the abused partner in the relationship to become aware of it. Additionally, these cycles are very sensitive and complex, and having a professional educated in these areas is a very important resource to rely on so that someone can be objective and engage with it. Now, if you can't necessarily tell, that cycle starts out by tension builds within a relationship, there's breakdowns of communication, the victim starts to become fearful, or like, maybe I need to placate them. Then in number two, an incident occurs, the abuse happens, verbal, emotional, physical, might be through anger, blaming, arguing, threatening, intimidating, isolating, any of these. Basically, the dangerous abusive event occurs. Then three, reconciliation. The abuser apologizes. They give excuses. They blame the victim. They say, you made me do this. I didn't abuse you. Or that it wasn't as bad as they thought, to lessen the blow. And then a calm kind of forms, whether during the reconciliation a gift was given, fun was had, or just some type of reconnecting was done so that for the calm can reignite, the incident was forgotten. The abuse never took place, and we're back to joy within our honeymoon phase. We're connected. And then we're just waiting until tensions start to build and another incident occurs. And this can cycle repeatedly over a long period of time. So please use these resources as you can. Share it with someone if you like. And if you hadn't known about this, come ask some questions, come find out more, because anyone is capable of experiencing these things. And if it's you, you deserve support, and we want to give that. So I want to say thank you very much for coming to this workshop and watching it. To give you a short little bit of info about the Counseling Center here, which we'd love to hear from you and see you, is we offer counseling sessions. Between 4 to 6 sessions during the semester is very average, and 98% of previous students that have come in as clients within the center have found it to be effective. So there's not necessarily a limitation on how much support you get, but you can imagine between 4 to 6 meetings, which goes across 1, 2, or 3 months of a semester, is identified as very effective. We also do couples counseling, and yep, we actually do that. Not every counseling center at universities across the country does it, but you both have to be Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University students at Daytona Beach, for our instance, and potentially wherever you're going to school. So both partners have to be students, and otherwise you can be referred to resources. The Counseling Center is also doing a lot of groups and workshops, just like this one. and also more counseling focus, life experience focus, and stress focus. So we have all sorts of arenas. We got some good stuff coming. If you'd like to know more, just give us a call, 386-226-6035, and we would love to hear from you. But that is the time that I have. I wish you well. And please, if you need to contact me, my email address is smitk117 @erau.edu. smitk117 at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.edu. So I appreciate the time and wish you well.